And you can see what we have going on here in terms of why one of them looks so much sharper and the other doesn't. So there are two lines. This one is actually the shape that we converted last Thursday. This is just another line that I drew back in, which is what we had when this first started. Remember, we used the pen tool to create this line, and then we outlined it to get it to be a shape. Well, as you recall, whenever you draw a line, if you're not careful about where you draw it, it could end up right on one of the pixel lines. I mean, on the grid lines when you zoom in and you're in pixel preview mode. And you can see this anti-aliasing effect going on, right? It's not on a pixel row. So part of it is moving over onto this column, and part of it is moving onto that column, and you can tell it's not a solid black. It kind of has a bit of a gray. It's like 2 pixels wide. It's just not quite right. And even though, and this is, again, I'm just kind of demonstrating or recapping what we talked about. Even though I have my keyboard increment set at half a pixel, right?
Do you have the camera on?
I do, yes, it's recording. So even though I have my preferences set so that any keyboard movement I do is only half a pixel, technically you would think that if I move this over with my arrow key, it would fix the issue, right? It would move this over just half a pixel, which would make it land right in the center of one of these columns. But that's not the case, because when you're in pixel preview mode, zoomed in, your movements, Illustrator's trying to help you out here, it continues to move 1 pixel at a time. And that's something that Illustrator does by default in order to try to help you keep your artwork aligned to the pixel grid. But of course, because this is a line, we really don't want it behaving like that. Now, what I could do, watch the difference here, is I could switch over to preview mode, right? I am not in pixel preview mode. And then try moving this line over half a pixel, okay? I use the arrow key to move it a half a pixel. Now when I go back to pixel preview, you'll see this line did indeed move half a pixel, which is right down the middle, and that's where we want it. Did that make sense, the difference between why in pixel preview mode it's moving a whole pixel, and in preview mode it's moving according to the settings I have in the preferences? Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Is it pretty clear? Anyone confused by that?
Didn't we also expand?
We did expand it, but I showed you a version where you could still maintain a line and not have to expand it into a shape to get it to move around. So, you guys, questions on that, Colton, or you guys?
I'm just discussing it.
You got it?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. In pixel preview mode, just remember that, because this next project is going to be a web design project. And one of the things I'm going to be looking at is if your artwork is aligned to that pixel grid, right? So there are times where it might be advantageous to switch over into preview mode so you can move your artwork around and take advantage of more control in the movements. And of course, in pixel preview mode, you know you'll be moving in whole pixel increments, which makes control of your artwork for web design really nice. There's one other option I'll show you guys in regards to this this aligning to pixel grid. I'm going to undo that last move so that my line is no longer aligned to the pixel grid here. And you'll see that now it's back over to that, it's aligned on this on the actual grid line, and so it's anti-aliasing that stroke, not really knowing exactly what to do. It's blending over onto two pixel columns. So I'm going to click on this, and with that, I'll go ahead and open the transform panel. Now there are different ways to open the transform panel. Some of you guys already have the transform panel expanded, and you will already see the X, the Y, the W, and the H fields. And yours will be orange, right, which means you can click on those. You know, mine isn't orange because I don't have the I don't have the transform panel already open. But you can click on those, and you'll see that by clicking on any of these letters on your monitor, you will open the transform panel up. Now, when you do that, notice what the transform panel offers down here at the bottom. Earlier in the semester, we looked at the scale, strokes, and effects stuff and the settings for that. But there's also an align to pixel grid option that appears in the transform panel. And with my object selected here, I'm going to click on the align to pixel grid and watch what happens to that stroke. It automatically shifted over so that it would align to the pixel grid all by itself. And from now on, whenever I move this line around, it will always want to snap to the pixel grid. Unless, of course, I switch over to preview mode, try to move it over half a pixel. Well, actually, I don't know what would happen there. Let's try it. So now that it's aligning to the pixel grid, I'm going to switch over to preview mode. Oops, there we are. And I'm going to try moving it over half a pixel. It looks like it didn't do a half a pixel, even though my settings or keyboard increments are set to half a pixel. It looked like it moved over a full pixel. I'll switch back over to the, there it is. Even though I had this setting in Illustrator telling it to go half a pixel, it moved a full pixel because this transform option is overriding everything else.
So it should be half a pixel for the keyboard increment?
Yeah, that's, whoops.
Mine was
Gosh.
still set at 1.
Yeah, if yours is set at 1, then that's fine. It's actually, especially for your web design projects, you want to be set in whole pixels for your movements, right? Mine just happened to be set at half a pixel there. Okay. Any questions on that align to pixel grid stuff? Hopefully that'll prove helpful for your future projects. Okay. So the neat trick that I wanted to show you guys about web design. It's really not anything super spectacular, but it is using some of the stuff that we've already been working with to create the illusions of the illusion of depth, bevel, effects, that type of thing. And really, that's what a lot of user interface design is when it comes to using Illustrator or Photoshop. You're sort of tricking the eye into seeing something, but really it's just graphic objects. I mean, we've already been doing some of that stuff with shadows and other elements to make things pop. But what I'll do now is I'll use the same technique that we've been using to create an effect that makes this line that we created on Thursday. This is the one that's actually a shape. It's not a stroke. I could use either one of these. I'll just go back to this one that's actually a shape so that you're able to follow right along. As a matter of fact, I'll delete this one just to avoid confusion. So you should have this shape that this 1 pixel wide shape that we created on Thursday. And go ahead and select it. And from there, we'll open up our what is it? The appearance panel. Excuse me, transform panel. Jeez. All right. Well, you know what? I do have the transform panel open here. And while I'm here and I have my object selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on this Align to Pixel Grid button for this rectangle. And that way, if we go to move this at all, it's going to stay aligned to the pixel grid. It's going to remain aligned. And so now that I've selected my rectangle, or still have it selected, and my appearance panel is open, go ahead and click on Add New Effect, and it should bring up the dialog box or the drop-down menu that allows you to pick the different effects. As we've done previously, I'm going to select Stylize and Drop Shadow. What's the first thing that I like to do when I open some of these panels? Preview, right? It allows you to see what the heck you're doing. So Again, that default has come back into play. Multiply, black, 75%, 775. If I click on preview, you'll see our line or our shape there has, or it should have, some sort of drop shadow. It looks like the drop shadow is not rendering, probably because this object is way too small and that drop shadow is blurring out so much. It's got a 5-pixel blur, and so it's blurring out so much that it doesn't even render anymore.
So what is multiply? What's the mode?
Multiply is a blending mode. Multiply, basically what it does is it knocks out white. It just, anything that is white gets completely knocked out it becomes transparent, basically. And anything that's lighter than white gradually becomes transparent. So it's what Illustrator and Photoshop call blending modes, or modes in this case, I think. Blending
So for
modes.
drop shadows, you're using on multiply, not.
It depends on, so in this case, we're not actually doing a drop shadow. We're going to be doing a highlight, okay? And by the way, just a little aside here on this topic, these kinds of things drive programmers crazy, web developers. If you're using multiply and opacity, it drives them crazy because they're like, well, how do I create that? I can work in colors, but I can't, the web doesn't have an opacity 75 multiply blending mode. So the best thing to do is to try and work in solid colors for web as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to switch this blending mode for the drop shadow to normal. And normal will result in whatever color I choose here is what is going to be rendered here on my object, the exact color. It's not going to try to apply any other transparency type modes to it. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do to ensure that my color maintains its value is change the opacity to 100 so that it's 100% solid color. The X offset, I'm creating a highlight, and you'll see that in a moment, but I want the X offset to be 1 pixel to the right, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'll hit 1 pixel offset to the right. Then I'll do a Y offset of 0. I want this to move exactly over to the right, and I'll do a blur of 0 because I don't want this thing fuzzing out on me. I want it to be a solid line. And so when I do that, you see now, because this is still black, I have my black fill and I have a black drop shadow, solid 1 pixel. And you can see now with these parameters exactly why it looks like that, right? So I'm going to change the color of this. Oh, you might not have it selected if you didn't see that transformation take place. And so the next thing I'm going to do here is select a color, and I am going to select white. And here in the color picker, you can click on the color field itself and move up to the left-hand corner of the color picker, and that is 100% white. You can see CMYK, it's all set at 0. RGB is 255 all the way across. That's completely white. And then in the world of web, 6Fs is the color white in the world of web. So I'll click on OK now, and you notice that highlight changes to, or my drop shadow actually becomes a highlight. And we'll click on OK in the drop shadow dialog box, and then hit Command 1. And Command 1 will, of course, zoom you out to view this artwork at 100% size. So why have I done all this? It doesn't look all that great. I'll zoom in a little bit.
Drop shadow at?
That was the first step we did when we applied the effect. That was what we were working on.
So it's under the effects?
Uh-huh.
Under, no, I can't find drop shadow.
Stylized drop shadow?
Stylized
Uh-huh.
drop shadow, okay.
So why did we do this? Well, what I'm trying to do is create the illusion of a separator, right? This is separating this area here, which is going to turn out to be a button, as you'll see, from this header part over here. Now, it doesn't look quite right. You know, it's a little too stark. That white is just a little too white. And the beauty of this is that you can adjust the color at any point in time. We found out that white is a little too dominant. It kind of takes over the entire line. So I'm going to go back to my effect by clicking on this object. In my appearance panel, I'll click on drop shadow here so I can edit the effect. And I'll go back to this color picker and I'll try something that is a little more of a subtle transition, to something that's not just solid white. Right now our background color is green, so I should work in the green hues to try to find something that's going to yield the results I want. And to do that, you can click anywhere along this color spectrum indicator here. And when you do, this whole field of the color picker will change to the hues of that color. So I'm going to click somewhere inside of the green area here. And by doing that, you see my whole hue shifted over to the greens because I click somewhere in the green area. Now I'll select one of these greens that's somewhat darker than what I have, or lighter than what I have as my background header there. And yours is going to be a different color, obviously. So if you're working with a pink header, you'd probably work in the pink hues up here. Because mine's green, I'm doing something that's going to hopefully turn out to be a little more subtle. I'll go ahead and click on OK now, and then my preview button should be set. I can see what's going on. I'll click on OK again to apply that. And now when I go to Command 1 to zoom out, you can kind of see what we've resulted with here in this design. Basically, the subtleness of this drop shadow, which is really working as a highlight, is creating the illusion of this line being beveled into the header. Does that make sense? You guys see visually how that's working? So this is a trick. Now now that you know how this is done, start looking at websites, and if you have mobile devices, look at the interfaces for those mobile devices. You'll see this technique used frequently for this type of effect, where it looks like this looks like it's clearly separated, obviously, because there's a line going across. But what's happened is it looks like this line is actually beveled into, right, almost like a V shape. You can imagine a V shape being beveled into this header, and the light is coming in from the left, hitting this side, making it lighter, and the side on the left is in shadow. So anyway, that's the tip I wanted to show you guys. Seems like something simple, but it's used quite a bit as a trick of the eye in user interface design for stuff like this. Okay. Any questions on that?
So that's a black line with a lighter green, right?
That's right. It's the green is lighter than the background. If it was the same color as the background, it would be even more subtle, and it might not quite have that highlighted effect that we'd like to see on there. Okay, so with all that, we've now created a header for our layout. We're starting to get somewhere. It still looks like just a bunch of shapes. And we'll continue to add more detail to it to improve the look of it. Okay? And the next thing we're going to do is add a symbol to really make this look like a button. We're going to add a symbol to that, and hopefully we get that to look like a button. So, as you guys recall from earlier in the semester, Adobe Illustrator is kind enough to provide a lot of symbols for us to use, right? So in order to do that, let's go ahead and open our symbols panel, and it's the one that has the little lucky clover leaf on it. If you're working with essentials, this is where it should be. you can click on symbols and it'll open it back up. And I happen to have, I don't know what symbol set this is, but this isn't the one I'd like to use in this case. Although these are fine looking little buttons, they're not really going to be the appropriate choice for what I'm trying to do in my design. So there's two ways, of course, a couple of ways to access the different symbols that Illustrator has built into it. And in the bottom left-hand corner, you can always click on this button to access the symbol library, or the libraries, because there's several. So we'll go ahead and click on that button, and you'll see a bunch of stuff appears. We're going to go down here to Web Icons. And now Web Icons has opened up. It's given us a new set, a set of icons that we can use in our app. And for this one, and you'll see why in about 45 minutes, why I'm going to use this wrench as the button in the top left-hand corner. And I'm going to do that by simply dragging this symbol to my artboard. It doesn't matter where it lands because I need to do some adjustments to it. The first thing I notice is it's too big, right? If I were to try to drop this into my little object here, that button is just too big. You guys have probably heard me, you guys remember me saying this for other projects, but you know, good design often incorporates a lot of space around objects. You know, sometimes it's good to be generous with your margins. If we were to take this and even shrink it just a little bit, and I'll click on it to reduce the size just a touch, I'm gonna with my bounding box, I have the object selected. I'm going to click on the upper left-hand corner and then hold the Shift key down to scale it down so that it's stays proportional. And you can see it's fitting in that box, but it still looks a little gaudy. Right? It's a little big, a little oversized. Just kind of has a bit of a chunky look to it because of that. So we want to scale this down, and I'm not going to come up with any percentage, but visually I want to scale it down so that it's still recognizable as a wrench, as the object that it is, but also so that it fits comfortably inside of that space as a button. So I'll click on this again, and I'll reduce this down even further. And now that I've moved it to what I think visually looks like the center of this rectangular area, I'm going to click on it. My bounding box appears. If you don't have your bounding box up, hit Command-Shift-B and you'll have your bounding box appear so you can scale this. Now I'm going to hold the Shift and Option keys and click on any one of the corners and scale down. And what that's doing is the Shift is scaling it in proportion. The Option key is scaling it from the center now, not from the corner. I kind of like that. I'll let go and see where that is. That might still be a little big for me personally. Just a touch. Maybe a 95% size of that would be good. But I'll leave it at this for now, just because I want you to definitely be able to see it, right? This monitor or projector is not the greatest. I don't want the details to get lost, and so I'll leave it at this size. Okay. Who remembers what the method would be for me to colorize this this symbol? I want to change the color.
Isolation mode?
Isolation mode allows you to do it. Yep.
What is isolation mode?
Isolation mode you go into when you
It keeps bringing me to isolation mode when I click
yeah,
on stuff.
I know. If you triple click on something, it'll take you into isolation mode, and it'll basically, it's the equivalent of drilling down to just the essentials of what you clicked on. So you recommended going into isolation mode, or did you double click to get to this window here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that allows you to change this button, right? And what's going to happen is, if you go to edit the color here, if you're using this symbol anywhere else in your project, it's going to change the color there, right? Yes.
So let's say I pulled the symbol out and changed that one's color, but then I pulled another one out, and that little web icon set.
Uh-huh.
Would they still both be changed, or are they separate?
No, they'll be separate because it's a separate instance of that symbol. But if you had used this, like say you have multiple screens, multiple artboards you're designing in, well, if you changed it in one place, it would also change in other locations where you use this exact symbol. And that might not be the desired result, right? You might not want it to. In some cases, you might have screens that use a different color palette, and so that you might not want that to happen. So the way I like to work with symbols, especially simple symbols like this, is I like to release them from my artboard, as a symbol completely. I like to just turn them into shapes because I know I'm going to be sticking with this. So I want to turn it into a shape as if I had drawn it. And one quick method for doing that, there are a couple, but the quickest method is simply to right-click on the symbol. And if your right click on your mouse isn't hold down the Control key and click. And holding the Control key down is the equivalent of a right click for a single mouse or a single button mouse. And you notice when I right click, I get this break link to symbol option. And I'll go ahead and select that. And now notice what happened to my selection. It's not just outlined anymore as a symbol. Every single line segment has been highlighted now because we've converted this to a shape, totally independent of that symbol.
Is that the same as object expand appearance?
Yep.
Also? Okay.
That's another method that you could use to get the same results. So again, with illustrators, a few different ways to do things. But this one's just quick and easy. You could just right-click right on the object. And now this is just an object like anything else. And I am going to change the color of this to something that I think kind of works as a button here. And for me, I want this button to look like, again, similar to this line, I want this button to look like it's depressed, like it's sunk into the surface, right? And to do that, we've already been working on this technique a little bit with when we did these letters down here. I'm going to do a drop shadow. I'm going to create a drop shadow that's light, right? So that it looks like a highlight on the bottom edge. That makes it look like the light's coming from above and it's highlighting the bottom edge because that object is pushed back. It's an optical illusion. But before I do that, I want to get the green right. Because I have a green header up here, I want this to have some form of green, and because my concept is for this to be inset, it needs to be a darker green than the gradient that's in the background of that header. And so I'm going to switch over to my swatches panel here by clicking on the swatches button, and I'm just going to pick the stock green from Illustrator here. That's the darkest green in the second row. I'll click on that, and I look at it, boy, and it's still not quite right. And that's okay. It gave me a starting point. And I don't know if we covered this technique a lot in class, but when I design, I often start with the stock colors from Illustrator. Unless you're working with one of the cooler, remember when we worked with the cooler color swatches that Adobe provides. We did that several weeks ago. There are pre-built swatches that you can use. You can certainly use those. But a lot of times when I'm just designing on the fly and exploring with colors, I like to start with the stock ones and then modify them. Yeah, Christian.
How do you get back to cooler? I don't remember how.
Cooler is an extension that you can find here under the window menu. Extensions, Cooler.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
What's
And-
cooler?
Cooler is a web-based, it's a website. It's a website that allows you to create and allows people, anyone, to create and upload color swatches for use in Illustrator or Photoshop. And you can see it takes a while to load because it's actually loading all of the color palettes from the web. These are all being fed right into Illustrator from the Cooler website. You know, Adobe Illustrator has partnered with Cooler for this great little service. I'm sure Cooler got a great deal out of it as well. So like I said, I like to start with a base color from here and then manipulate it. And so to do that, it's hard for me to figure out what color I want this to be when all these blue lines are kind of masking it. Do you agree? Sometimes, I don't know if you guys have been doing this, but sometimes it's really hard to work on your stuff
I don't have all those lines.
because you haven't converted your symbol to an outline yet.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we right-clicked on it.
Oh, I did that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, you do have the outlines. I see
do?
it.
Oh, they just
Do
got
you
all
make it?
blurry like yours.
Yeah. Yeah. But nevertheless, they're not all blurry like mine. Mine won't be as blurry if I zoom in. I think, Robin, you were zoomed in a bit.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, they're not as blurry now. But I have to admit, even sometimes when I'm looking at artwork like this, I have a hard time figuring out if it's the right color when there's all those lines around it. Okay? So what I typically like to do in this case, and I have to remember that I do it, you guys want to heed this warning as well, is I turn off my bounding box, first of all. And who remembers a keyboard shortcut for that?
Command
Shift.
Command Shift B. Yep. Command Shift B is it. Command Shift B turns off the bounding box. So there it is. That's gone. And it also toggles it back on. So Command Shift B works like a toggle. I like the subtlety of that color there, Alexis, that you picked. So yeah, that toggles it. So yeah, obviously going back and forth, it'll bring it back, it'll turn it off. Now, who knows the keyboard shortcut for temporarily getting rid of the outlines on my artwork so that they're not there? It's still I still want it to be selected, but I don't want the outlines there. Anyone remember that, the keyboard shortcut? Pretty straightforward if you remember the terminology. It's kind of hard, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if we've covered this. Basically, what we're doing is we're hiding these lines. And the keyboard shortcut for that is Command H. Watch this. It's still selected. All I'm going to do is hit Command H. And now my artwork is still selected, but the bounding box I turned off, and I hid all of the selected lines on my object. So that's a really good technique for you guys to consider using when that junk is getting in your way of perfecting your designs. Of course, you'll want to remember to turn it back on. Command H, it toggles it right back on. You can see it was selected the whole time. The lines were hidden. And let's see if we can. Gosh, the thing is, sometimes I forget where to find this stuff. Hide edges is what it's called. It's under the View menu. You can see Hide Edges. Command H is what will also yield the same results from the drop-down menu. So we'll go ahead and hide edges, and now I can really look at my artwork without anything distracting my design. I'm going to double-click on this green swatch to bring up the swatch options panel, and I'm going to start playing around with these sliders. I know I want to darken it, so I'm going to move the blue to the left a little bit. Oh, I need to hit preview, of course, for it to take effect. And I'm going to move the green to the left so that it really starts to get dark back there. There we go. That's a color that I kind of like, maybe a little bit lighter. I tend to like subtle effects there.
Do you want it to be darker than the background?
Darker than for this, yeah, in this case I do because of the effect that I want. Oh, it doesn't look as good on screen. I'm going to make it a little darker. On my screen it has nice contrast. On the projector it doesn't, so I'm going to make it a little darker so that you guys get a good preview as to what's going on. So it's darker than the background, and what that's already starting to do is it's kind of making your eye. Remember, dark. For those of you guys that are taking other art and design classes, dark colors recede, right? That's why I try to wear dark jeans black shirts because they make me look skinnier. I recede away from
Is that
you.
why women wear black?
That's why women wear black all the time. Because they make you recede into the distance. If you wear white with horizontal stripes, oh man, forget it. You're just whoop. So yeah, dark colors recede. So that's what's happening here, right? This color. I mean, not quite yet because there's no other effects applied to it, but you can almost envision that thing is carved into that header background because it's darker. It's just receding. That's all it's doing. It's an optical illusion. My object is still selected, and of course you guys probably know what's coming next. I'm going to apply a drop shadow. Now, I really liked the drop shadow effect that I did here. This is a nice color. I'm going to try to do the same color so I don't have to go pick it again by simply clicking on the Effect menu item and clicking and selecting Apply Drop Shadow. And you'll see, oh, it didn't pick up the same color. Probably, oh, I know why. I had applied it and then I adjusted it, and that's why it turned out like this. But that's okay. It still saved us a few steps because I don't have to go in and create, a 100% fill, a normal blending mode, a 1 pixel distance. I'll have to change the 1 pixel distance, but a lot of the work has been done for me already.
Back to that menu, the drop shadow menu, because mine didn't do the drop shadow, did outline.
So does anyone else have that question? How do you get back to the drop shadow option?
In the
Carlos?
appearance?
Yep. In the appearance panel.
So is this the X offset or Y?
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up the appearance panel. That was the next step. And you'll see my drop shadow effect is indicated here on my object because it is selected. I'll go ahead and click on drop shadow and you'll see it's actually rendering exactly like what we see here. I'm going to change the X offset to 0 and the Y offset to 1. After hitting the preview button, you'll see that this highlight, or drop shadow essentially, is moving in the right direction. I'm going to go back to a green. In this case, because I didn't create a swatch out of it, I'm just going to pick a green that's pretty similar to what I had before. And again, I'm just picking colors kind of manually here, not really being ultra precise. We can be by creating a swatch out of our color, but in this case, I'm happy with the results. And you can already see it zoomed in, the effect that we're getting. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and now take a look at that little effect. You can really see that wrench is completely receding and cutting into that header bar, because the optical illusion is, we see the world around us as light from above. The great Michelangelo, Botticelli, great masters, boy, they knew that. I'll even credit Thomas Kincaid with some of this stuff, although my wife will kill me if she heard me say Thomas Kincaid in a college class.
Why?
Oh, she's one of those persnickety artists.
Does she like his stuff? I guess not.
No, not much.
I like it.
I think she was a sell. I think she considers him a bit of a sellout, because he took his beautiful works and threw them on mouse pads and things like that.
Oh, I see.
But anyway, this is kind of the effect that we're getting. The illusion of light from above is causing that wrench to recede right into our header. So with that, especially since my voice is cracking, why don't we take a break? Let's be back in 7 minutes. So what is that? 42. 7:42, because we have a lot of cool stuff to cover. We're going to get into some other options with images and more effects, and we'll end up with something that looks like an app, I think, that you'll be able to write home about. All right, I'll kick the lights back on and let's do a quick break. I need some water.
You said 7
Did you
minutes?
do it the same color? Oh,
Who,
how do you get the background selected?
I clicked on it.
The,
You can also meatball it. There's a few different
it's
ways.
not,
Real quick question. Who knows what the default opacity on an attribute is? Any ideas?
100?
100%. Yeah. So it's nice that it says default because sometimes I don't know how you can make it so that the default wasn't 100%, but yeah,
oh, yeah.
the default is 100%. I knew you'd figure it out, Robin. So I have this other fill that I've applied to the same background. And this one, I applied that grain effect to it, like we did on the button last week. And this grain effect has an opacity of 3%. So that's what makes it so subtle. If I change that to 100%, you'll see that effect in full glory, and it's not very pretty. Just looks like a QR code or something. So I'll go ahead and change it back to 2% or whatever it was, so that it's a very subtle thing that overlays the gradient below it.
Where was the grain at?
So to bring back the grain effect,
Where is it?
you click on your object.
Yeah.
This is where I can demonstrate again to you guys. You click on the object itself, and the first thing you have to do is add a new fill layer to this object. So we have our original, and I added a new fill by simply clicking on the Add New Fill button in the Appearance panel. So that created a duplicate of my original gradient. Now there are two gradients exactly the same applied to it. But what I did was applied this grain Photoshop effect to this fill layer that's on top. In order to do that, you simply click on the fill layer itself. Okay? Then you can go to Effects, Add New Effect. And from down here at the bottom, there's the Texture options, and the second one down from the top is Grain. Once you do that, it'll open Photoshop or Illustrator's Photoshop filters window, and I kept it at sprinkles, the intensity 20, the contrast at 80. Just to show you guys, I was talking to Christian a little bit ago. He used this vertical kind of thing. Oh, mine's very different from what you ended up with.
Oh, mine's really grainy.
You must have adjusted some of these differently here.
Oh, mine was also a gradient that got lighter at the top.
Ah, yeah, mine's a little subtle thing. Yeah, very cool. But nevertheless, it's just one of these options here. And for the gradient that I used, I chose 20% intensity, or a setting of 20 on intensity, 80 on contrast, and sprinkles as the effect itself. And then I clicked OK. And by doing that, I've now added a second effect to this object. You see
You did
that?
it twice?
Yeah, because I had already done it once and I wanted to demonstrate it, so I did it again. That's okay. I can simply click on that layer and delete one of those. The last step, so that you don't end up with something that looks like this, right, is change the opacity on that fill attribute. And you can do that by clicking on the opacity link, which brings up the transparency panel, and change that to something really subtle like 2%. And that adds an overall texture to the background.
That's what I was.
Now, my image, when it came in, looked something like this, right? Yours probably does too. And you notice there's this harsh line between the background and the background of his car or the photo. And so what I did is I just played around with different blending modes until I found one that I thought was nice because it showed some of that texture in the background come through. And the one for that I chose was screen. So I opened the transparency panel, and you can access that right within the appearance panel by clicking on the opacity text again and changing the blending mode here to screen. And you see there's still a little bit of a line down here. So, in the perfect world, I would probably change my background to match this image better because, it's actually nice, right? It's a nice, rich, dark background. Looks pretty cool. If I place that behind my button, that looks pretty nice, So the better thing would probably be to consider changing my actual background color to match, that a little better, which means I can change this slightly as well. Okay. So, any questions on that?
I have a
Yeah,
question
Christian.
that's not like completely related. It's just
Okay.
a weird thing I'm encountering. Every time I click on something, it expands it out in the layers. What is that?
Yeah, that's because it was a symbol that had been converted to an object, and it was placed on its own layer within a layer,
Okay.
and so it's expanding to show it. You can move it out to its own layer,
Okay.
and not have to deal with that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
What would the bottom part be called anyway? Like,
This here?
yeah, just menu bar or something?
That's, sorry, yeah, my file was very well organized here. Tab bar is what this should be called. If you wanted to separate that into your own layer, that would be a tab bar.
And you don't use capitals in that, right?
No. Good question though, Christian. Using capitals, you guys remember why I tend to use an all lowercase no spaces naming convention? You guys remember why? For the web, to get ready for web. Exactly. And because we're theoretically designing this for a web or a digital media application, we definitely wanted to stick to naming conventions that make this more
What'd you call it again?
compatible.
Title bar?
This is tab bar, TAB. That's what this is called in the operating system environment at least for, I don't know about Android. I haven't really worked on any Android projects for design, and I really don't want to because Android's all over the place. There's no standard. There are no standards in Android. You can do whatever you want, which often results in kind of ugly apps, I think, at least from what I've seen. Oh, I shouldn't be such a Apple fan. But nevertheless, so here we are. We have, that kind of looks like an app. It's simple, right? But, you can look at that and you know what it does. So, from a communication standpoint, it certainly serves its purpose. Rawson, how you doing on yours? Are you you're sticking with the flat thing? Okay, you got some texture going on. Cool. Cool.
Oh, the little house.
You got a different. You picked a nicer photo there, Cynthia. I like that. So there we are. There you have it. The Audi app designed right here, AD62 fall 2013. Maybe we can pitch this to Audi and see if they'll buy our designs. So yeah, that's basically the essentials of creating an app for using Adobe Illustrator, an app interface, the design of it at least, not the app itself, but just the design of the interface. Yep, this is basically how the process is done using Illustrator as a tool. And of course, the more complex your app is, the more elements you'll add, more things you'll need to think about in terms of design. So you guys are welcome to continue exploring on this design. Any questions at this stage for this particular project? You guys feel pretty comfortable with all the steps that we've followed? Using the appearance panel, multiple graphic styles, a bunch of attributes applied to an object. You know, those effects to create the illusion, the illusion of depth. That's all part of it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this because I actually like this darker colored version better. I'll save that. I'll save my original design. This is where we started, and it didn't take us very long. It took most of you, 5 to 15 minutes to get through some of those changes. I know some of you are still working on it, but you're exploring additional design directions, and that's great. So, I will be getting. I said I was going to get into slices a little bit. I won't be doing that today, just based on the time we have. But I will be. We'll be doing more interface design stuff in the ensuing couple of sessions. Oh, and by the way, you guys know that we don't meet on Thursday Thanksgiving, right? There's no class on Thanksgiving. All right, I just want to make sure you know. I'd hate for you guys to be sitting outside the door waiting. Dark hallway. Everyone's eating turkey and you're standing in the hallway. So, but we are meeting on that Tuesday. So, do keep that in mind. Okay.